How's it going? My name's Colin Winters. I'm the host of Panthers Place, and today we are going over how hot is Scott Fitterer's seat exactly. Now, Scott Fitterer, of course, is the GM for the Carolina Panthers, and we are, of course, in a dire situation as a franchise, which means that on the internet and with beat reporters and stuff like that, you start getting to the conversation of who is on the hot seat, who could be fired, who's responsible for why we're in this situation, and one of the big names you're going to see, of course, will be your head coach, your GMs, and stuff like that. And because Frank Reich is on his first year, I feel like it's a very obvious, probably no, he won't get fired no matter if he goes 0-17. Then I think the best option is to go over is Scott Fitterer's seat hot, and that's why I want to discuss this. So we are going into year 3 with Scott Fitterer being the GM for the Carolina Panthers, and we are just going to go real quick, look at the moves that he's made each year, and then we're going to go over into why I think his seat is either hot or not. So with his 1-year moves, he did a pretty good job at clearing cap space, making good cap management and stuff like that. One thing I didn't like is that he released K1 Short, and then of course this is the beginning of when we started to have real issues with run defense, and K1 Short was always a really good run defensive tackle for us, so I feel like that was a bad move there. He also picked up Darnold's 5th-year option without really seeing anything from him at all when it came to trading for him, which I'm not going to say the Darnold trade was bad. We did give up a little bit too much compensation, but it was a fair guess to try and bring out the best in him when we saw multiple other QBs going to new teams and doing well on their first year just with a new setting. So it was a fair idea to try to do something with him, but we did give up a little bit too much. And then picking up his 5th-year option before you've even seen anything come from him, that was a pretty questionable move. But he did extend Taylor Moton, who was at the time the best offensive lineman that we have, and still probably is at the moment. But Taylor Moton, extension really good, and he did a pretty good few restructures to get that management grade even further, with mostly a restructure of Christian McCaffrey's contract and a restructuring of Shaq Thompson's contract. When it came to free agency that year, he also signed Hassan Reddick, even though he let him walk later, but still signing him in the first place was really good. And he signed Frankie Louvu, who was a really, under the radar signing that ended up panning out really well for the Panthers. One bad free agent move I would say would be the signing of Matt Paradis, and it wasn't necessarily because Matt Paradis was terrible. I mean, he wasn't great, but for the guy he was, we did overpay him, but he was an all right guy for what we needed at the moment. And then we get to his draft. In the draft, of course, you see some people saying that you should be a little bit prehensive calling the Matt Rule era drafts Fitterer issues, but I'm just going to put it because no matter what, he is the GM, he is part of those decisions, whether it's a small amount of decision making to a big amount, he's still a part of that decision no matter what. So I'm going to add that he drafted JC Horn, which I will die on the hill that was a good decision. Yes, his injury history is, pretty bad at the moment, but you can't really take that into factor, especially when he wasn't that bad in college. So the injury history, that's just a bad luck. Overall, I thought he was a really great draft pick at the point we were able to get him. A good draft pick as well was Brady Christensen, who, without the injury, was going to be a starting offensive guard for us. And then 2 bad moves were drafting Terrace Marshall Jr. and Tommy Tremble. Tommy Tremble just because, other than a few bright games in the year he was drafted, we saw really nothing. I mean, we were always waiting. When's it Tremble time? When's it Tremble time? Tremble time never came. And then TMJ, despite having a really good camp this year, really we haven't seen much of him on the field other than dropping balls out of bounds. So far, those 2, even though it's still early in their careers, we're probably not going to see anything from them, and they're probably going to be walking by the time their contracts are let up. When it came to more of the trades, like I said, the trading for Darnold wasn't terrible, but if it wasn't for the fact that we gave up way too much for him, we also traded away Denzel Perriman, which was just a huge cavalcade fuck up because of the fact that he ended up being a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker for the Raiders. We gave him away for pennies, and that was also a year where our linebacker play was god awful, and we needed someone to be a center filer middle linebacker, and he would have been that for us, but we ended up just drop my pencil. We ended up just completely letting him go just for pennies on the dollar. But for good, we did get Gilmore for only 6. He was going to hit waivers, so we decided just to give the 6 and got Stephon Gilmore, which was fantastic for our secondary. And we got something for Greg Little, which was pretty good. Getting anything for that caliber player, I think, pretty good. Recoup some of the picks that you gave up. So not terrible, it was just a nice trade to get anything for that type of character. Then we move on into year 2 of his tenure as GM, and that is where we, of course, have the infamous Christian McCaffrey trade, which I'm going to play devil's advocate here because at the time of the trade, I hated it. I hated it so much. So there's receipts on my Twitter that I hated the trade. I did think it would have been good for both teams if we had hit with those draft picks that we got, and we'll get into that later. But the trade for CMC was more so just giving CMC to a team that would also put him in a good position. It was a respect trade, if anything. But the fact that we even traded him in the first place was god awful. At the time, the running back market was not as bad as it was this past offseason, but it was still pretty bad. And CMC, of course, did have the injury history with the Carolina Panthers that was a little bit concerning, but even then, you knew the caliber of player he was, and I do not see any reason that we should have traded him at any point because he was the best player on our team by far. And trading him was just it was stupid. It really was stupid. Although a few good things is that we did extend DJ Moore at this time. We extended Luvu. He, more good salary cap management. We also extended Dante Jackson, which no matter what you think about him, if we did not have him, our secondary would be in an even worse spot than it already is right now. So no matter what you think of him as a player, not having him would be worse than having him. So that extension, I'm going to say, still goes into the good mark. And another issue, though, is that we did extend Ian Thomas for some reason. He's never done really anything for this team. He's a subpar blocking tight end and also has bricks for hands. So I don't understand that extension at all. We let Foreman go. We traded for Baker, which I, from the get-go, did not understand why. I was excited because, I like Baker Mayfield as a player, but didn't understand why we brought him in Carolina. He was just never going to be a scheme fit, so that was a bad one. But we did sign Xavier Woods, Bradley Bozeman, and Johnny Hecker. So that's a pretty good free agency for him in that year. And then we drafted Ikem Ekwonu, but other than that, there was no really good picks that have really panned out. And even Icky's having a down year this year. And now we go into year 3, which is, we can only talk about it so far. And so far we have, in free agency, we signed Von Bell, we signed Adam Thielen, we signed Andy Dalton, we re-signed Bradley Bozeman, re-signed Sam Franklin, re-signed Eddie Pinheiro. And those are all things that I would say are, surefire, really good. Signing Von Bell, really good safety for us so far. Signing Adam Thielen, he's the only wide receiver that is really a weapon right now. Signing Andy Dalton, you can never, I do not underestimate the power of having a good backup. And we've seen already by the game that he played against Seattle, having a good, dependable backup, whether it be a young backup or a veteran backup, absolutely crucial for a team. So that was a great signing. Re-signing Bradley Bozeman, he is a great center, absolutely disrespected by his Madden overall rating, but fantastic center. And then we re-signed Sam Franklin, who was a fantastic special teamer, who also really stepped up in his role when Xavier Woods is injured. And we re-signed Eddie Pinheiro, who is a great kicker. Unfortunately, that means we did give the short end of the stick to Zane Gonzalez, who I thought deserved more of a shot to really show that he can come back after his leg injury. Just didn't end up happening, and Eddie Pinheiro is still a really good kicker, so good signing there. Some question marks I have for when it comes to our signings is DJ Chark. Chark, I was a signing that I liked because we needed a speedy guy, but he's only ever been really a 1 to 2 year wonder, so I wasn't expecting him to be wide receiver 1, but after the camp he had, I was getting even more excited. He was having great chemistry with Bryson camp, and then now when it comes to playing, it just seems like he can't get the separation that he showed that he can get in camp and joint practices. So I'm going to say that right now it's a question mark, whether it's good, whether it's bad. It is a signing he made, and it's not terrible, so I won't hold that against him, but I won't say it's good for him. We signed Hayden Hurst, who is a really good safety valve, but every now and then seems like he's not having really good chemistry with the offense. Seems like he's a little bit uncomfortable in the scheme, but he did catch Bryce Young's first NFL pass, so that's pretty good. He's an alright safety valve. I would still say, still a question mark there, leaning more towards a good signing. And then we have Miles Sanders, who currently seems like if he's not running behind the best offensive line in football, that he can't do anything. But also we're using him as a inside dive back, which is just not what he is. So both the fact that we're not scheming for him properly and the fact that he just does not seem to be hitting holes as fast as he used to. And I think Lil Rock NASA says it the best. He's running like a back who's already been paid, not like a back who's trying to pay rent. And the draft, of course, I'm going to go into what he's done, and I will say that Of course, when it comes to draft picks, especially because this year is still going onward, take all these with a grain of salt. But no matter what, the good of the draft is drafting Bryce Young. I don't care what anyone says. I trust him. I'm going to give him this entire season to do whatever he needs to develop, especially because this offensive scheming and the offensive coaching is just so poor when it comes to our head coach right now that until we see something different, until we see a scheme that should work and he is failing in it, I'm going to give Bryce Young the benefit of the doubt and say that was just a good pick. The question mark so far is Mingo and Zavala, mostly because Mingo just seems confused when he's running now. He seems like he's not running routes very sharp. He seems like he's just looking for that open area and can't really find it too well. But he has made a few good catches, so he's just a question mark, not a bad pick. Zavala, on the other hand, he wasn't supposed to be starting at all at this point, so it's mostly just because Corbet and Christensen were injured. But so far, he's actually done pretty good. So what should have been just a depth pick is actually doing a pretty good job being forced into a starting role. So I'll put that as a question mark as well, leaning towards good. And then drafting DJ Johnson, I would say, is probably pretty bad at this point. I was willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they saw something in him, but trading up for him and then not even getting him to be dressed onto the field for half the time, more than half the time, really, that's just pretty bad. You can't really excuse that. So going into overall what I think of Scott Fitterer is that he has been doing great at cap management. He has actively put us into the teams that are highest in cap space, but he has been pretty terrible with trades when it comes to CMC, giving up DJ Moore, but then deciding not to pay Brian Burns. So why wouldn't you just give up Brian Burns and keep DJ Moore? Do the trade for Baker, the trade for Darnold, giving up too much for that, giving away Denzel Perriman, stuff like that. Terrible with trades. And even though he is good at making cap space doesn't mean anything if you don't use it to sign big names. And he has made no big name signings. The biggest name I can think of being Miles Sanders and Von Bell. Those are the two biggest names. And even then, they're not premium. They're really good players. Don't get me wrong. They're really good players. And, I mean, Sanders looked like a really good player coming off the year yet, and Von Bell has been a really good player for us. But they aren't like the big star names. It's not like you're going out and signing, like, let's say, Devontae Adams or something. He's not doing any of that with the cap space we have, and he's not paying the players that we need to extend with the cap space either, which is a huge issue. He also, so far, has just been pretty subpar with his drafting, and of course, like I said, a lot of people are giving, his first two drafts, a little bit of, leeway because they are rule drafts, but of course, depending on the reports that you read, he had more of a say, and then some of them he had no say, and some of them he had most of the say. It doesn't matter. No matter what, he was a part of that process. He's the GM who makes that pick, so his drafts have been pretty subpar. And just looking at the teams that he has helped build, they have gone in his first year 5-12, and his second 7-10, and currently we are 0-4. So with an overall rating of 12 to 26. So I would say, with the fans getting so fed up, his seat is getting toasty. But because of the fact that the owner we have is quite stubborn, I would say his seat is not hot. His seat isn't burning yet. It's not hot. It's not even to the point where it's to the point where you're sitting in the car and you put on the seat warmer a little bit and it's starting to get a little bit of back sweat, but you're too lazy and you're focused on driving to turn it off. It's that type of toasty, but it's not hot. You're not like racing to turn the seat off. You're still doing fine. And that's mostly because the ownership will probably be pretty stubborn at replacing anybody at this point of the year, even though it probably should happen sooner than later. But that is just my take. Of course, you guys could feel differently. When it comes to stuff like this, it is very subjective to see what you would blame completely on the guy and what you would blame on the guy that the player brought in just not doing what he's supposed to do, stuff like that. When it comes to talking to GMs, it gets very subjective and muddled up in whose stat is actually whose fault. So that is just my personal opinion of the Scott Fitterer situation. I would say his seat is getting toasty, but is not yet hot. Other than that, that's all I have for this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.